Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. I'm excited to be joined today by Landon Bentham, President and CEO of Callahan and Rice Insurance Group. Thanks for being here, Landon.
Glad to be here, Kenny. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Landon joined Callahan and Rice in 2015 as a sales producer, transitioned into their Director of Sales and Marketing in April of 2020, and recently became the CEO in January of this year. He is on the board of directors for the Independent Insurance Agents of North Carolina, one of the most tech forward associations in the space, who I have had the pleasure of interacting with a number of times. He is originally from Western New York, but made his way down to Fayetteville, North Carolina in 2004 to attend college at the Methodist University, and he's been in North Carolina ever since. I say the Methodist University because, incidentally, I also graduated from a Methodist university, um,
Nice, nice.
a university founded by Methodists way back in the day. So that was the connection I alluded to earlier. Landon and his wife are active members of their church and have two wonderful children. In his free time, Landon likes to work on construction projects for his church, golf, and go on adventures with his family. Landon, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the introduction. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so to set the stage, for Callahan and Rice, can you talk about what that perpetuation process was like? When did the conversation start? What were the steps? Is the previous owner still involved in the agency? All of the upfront stuff, and then we'll dig into it.
Sure. Uh, you kind of have to back up a little bit to when I first joined the agency. The agency was owned by my father-in-law.
Hmm.
Um, I met my wife, married my wife, and she's an only child and is in the medical profession. And so her father had this agency, and at the time had some loose ideas of what he might want to do with it when he was ready to be done, but didn't have a family legacy plan for the agency just because his daughter wasn't interested in it, and that was that, right? So when I came along, we had some early conversations about what he did and what I was doing. At the time, I was in fundraising and development programs for a university. Um, he said, he just mentioned to me, hey, if you're ever interested in a change in careers, why don't we talk about that? And
Hmm.
so after we were married about a year, we started some of those early discussions. And that quickly led to me, yeah, this is an interesting business. I've got a background of two sets of grandparents that I loved dearly who are no longer here. Both had entrepreneurial tracks to
Hmm.
their lives, and I wanted to take that entrepreneurial track at some point in my life. Didn't know what industry that would be in. Again, I was in fundraising, so I had this amazing opportunity to interact with business owners all throughout where I was
Hmm.
working. And I was like, yes, I would love to learn an industry and dig in and own it someday and all that stuff. I shared that story with my father-in-law pretty early on. And then it quickly became, that, hey, this is working. We were doing some good things in the agency with changing some of our processes. And anyway, long story short, those
Yeah.
conversations started in about 2016,
Okay.
and January of 2025 is when the perpetuation was finalized. So
Hmm.
that's a long runway from the
Yeah.
very first idea of it to learning the industry and moving through many iterations of a plan, which we can get into in more specifics if you'd like.
Did it take until January 2025 to have something on paper, or was part of your trajectory within the agency, was that like a written plan that you had to kind of go through the ranks, learn the
Yeah.
business, be ready to be the CEO of the agency? Yeah, what was the plan like? What did it end up being like?
We are a Main Street agency in a mid-sized town in North Carolina. We're not a large city, but we're not a small town either. As you can imagine, an independent insurance agency is very much a generalist in that world, with very key relationships, and it's still independently owned. And so, just trying to set the stage so you sort of understand the type of agency that we are. We really started to focus on writing something down in 2019.
Okay.
Um, we were in conversations about more directed conversations just with each other, he and I, about what happens when he's ready to retire, and how does this transfer work, and taxation issues and all that stuff. And that's when I suggested, I think we need to get a third party involved
Mm,
to help us sort of broker this deal and figure out some ways that we can structure it so that everybody is taken care of. It all makes sense. And that's when, actually, you mentioned at the outset of this podcast, Carrie Wallace. That's when we engaged Agency Focus,
mm.
and started working with Carrie on developing what this plan would look like and different options that were within. And in 2019, we modeled what was to be the transition.
Okay.
We modeled it financially. We didn't model it managerially. Okay.
Okay.
So we very much said, all right, this is what our growth rate looks like. This is where the EBITDA may be if we continue on the same trajectory. Um, and so we kind of worked through a lot of those different details, but that was in 2019. And then again, so that was the first iteration of the plan.
Hmm.
And then we had more formal documents that were starting to be created, late 2023, early 2024, which then led into January 25.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for stepping through that. So around 2019, but also kind of closer in 2023, 2024, what was the size of the agency? Was it just your father-in-law or were there more team members? What was the composition like?
Great question. So let me start with the end today
Yeah.
first and work backwards real fast. So we're a team of 17 now.
Oh, wow.
When we were in 2019, we were a team of 8.
Okay. Wow.
So and he quickly realized that we were able to grow this business, and he gave me the reins fairly early on in the process. And when I say that, I was very respectful of the operation and the business that he created, but
Hmm.
he knew that there was another level to what we were doing. And so, our premium volume at the time, I would venture a guess, we were well under 8 million, probably well under 5 million actually when I first started. Today we're close to 15. So there's been this explosion of growth, that has fueled this business. A lot of that, again, is some of the marketing processes and whatnot that we went through. So that was a very interesting time. And why that relates to perpetuation is this. And if there's any families working together, or sons-in-laws, or however family works out, or just an internal process that you feel like is really solid, if you've given managerial control, this is me speaking to the agent that could potentially be handing over the reins. One of the key things that we worked out was a freeze of the valuation. And what that means is, hey, we've grown this agency to a really healthy spot, and in 2019 we decided, now let's freeze the valuation and set a price based on that valuation around that time, plus or minus. If we continue to
Sure.
grow, we would change it a little bit, but let's use that valuation at that time. And what the benefit of that is it gives me, as the perpetuator or the perpetuatee, I'm not sure what side of that is, but
Sure.
it gives me the opportunity as a future owner to run as fast as I want to run, because any growth after 2019, right, starts to become a big deal for me if I'm going to sit in the ownership seat. And then also, between that period of time, between 2019 and 2025, the current owner gets the benefit of just someone running super, super hard, like it's their
Yeah.
business already, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a really, really key element to our plan. And I think we wouldn't have done it any other way. I think we were both the benefit of it greatly.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to follow up on that in a little bit because I think that's
Yeah.
a great lesson to take forward. I think you might have hinted at the answer of this, but is the previous owner still involved in the agency? Are they still producing, or did they January hand over the keys and head to the lake?
So I do think that there's a lot of benefit in having a plan in place ahead of time, because you do get to step through these things. He is very much involved. It's not 5 days a week, right?
Hmm.
It's not 40 hours a week, and he's earned the right to pull back, right? And
Hmm.
so that's a really cool thing. And he has a lot of key relationships and does work. A very heavy amount of work in the benefits side of our business, which I need him to continue to do. Right. So he is working for us as an employee, and does great work, as he always has. And I think it's really freed him up to have more of those conversations. He doesn't have the managerial pressure on him like he had before, right? And so he can go out and get back to the roots of what he loves to do, which is
Mm-hmm.
produce business and work with companies and work with people and help them solve problems.
I'd love to start to dissect your experience in that process. And I want to start with, what are the key lessons you learned going through a perpetuation process? What are those, like you mentioned, think about freezing the valuation so that you're incentivized to grow the business as you are stepping into that role. What are the other key lessons that you learned?
Taxes are a big deal. No, there's a lot of lessons. I think, we talked about a lot really in this first half of what we talked about is very much the financial side of things, but then there's this whole managerial side of things and leadership things,
Mm,
and that is just as important, if not more important, than a lot of the financial stuff that you're working on, and growth rates and sales processes. Great, 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 great. But you're also then beginning to be the leader of a team, which is growing in my situation and getting rather large, right?
mm,
And so through the perpetuation process, it was clear to me, and a lesson that I had to learn very quickly is I needed to start to take more intentional leadership steps within the agency, becoming an expert as much as I can in the practitioner of me in insurance, making sure I understood what these forms are saying, how to lead service agents through it, how to lead sales agents through it so that they're presenting the product in the way that's going to be helpful for the customer, help solve their problem. Just in general, it's leadership. It's being willing to step into leadership, knowing when and you know knowing when to push a little harder
mm.
and when to pull back a little bit, especially when it's your father-in-law's business, whom you have, and to this day, it'll choke me up if I talk too much about it, but like an
Sure.
incredible amount of respect for the business that he built. It's not easy to work towards large changes in the way that operates, because even if he says yes, which he always did and always continues to, that was like pulling at him a little bit. It's learning how to yin and yang that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people, I've talked with a lot of people in a similar situation as me, especially family. I think it's a benefit. We can get to this later, but it's a benefit on the
Yeah.
son-in-law thing, because I have this
Hmm.
healthy respect, and he didn't change my diapers, right?
Sure.
But I think if someone did, right,
Yeah.
you have this more,
Yeah.
dad, this is wrong. I'm
Yeah.
gonna, and I think that's where, as hard as it might be for a son or a daughter to go through that, and be sort of a, you know, very direct,
Hmm.
very intense about changes that need to happen. It's humbly realizing that you are only in the position you're in because of the success of your father, mother,
Yeah.
aunts, uncles, cousin, whoever it is, right?
Sure.
So I think that was a key lesson. Just trying to be very intentional about leadership and how I led through, how I led with all the
Yeah.
people around me.
I don't think it was a conversation that happened in this series of our podcast, but I feel like it happened in a prior conversation with the agency and talking through how that owner came into um, ownership and leadership of their agency. And I think that is such a perspective through humility to really look at things as like, the reason I want to continue this business, the reason I am able to, is because of the work of others. And
Absolutely.
honoring and respecting that, I think that's a healthy way to come into it. Any other key lessons that you think people should be aware of? Were there any lessons you had about how do you make sure that the team is on board with you through this? Because I would imagine there may be some folks within Callahan and Rice that have been with the agency longer than you have.
Yep. Hmm.
And did you learn anything in navigating those relationships and conversations?
I think the key word here, to be keenly aware of, and I think maybe a lot of this you could sort of chalk up, Kenny, to being self-aware. That entitlement is a thing that you have to guard against
Hmm.
if you're in this kind of a role, even if especially if you're a son or daughter direct. But if you are a son-in-law or just family in general, and you're in an agency, and there's been a 20-year CSR that handles the largest accounts in the office and is always the right hand of the owner, and you've got 5 years in the business, and it's starting to become clear that, holy cow, this person might be my boss someday. I think those are really, really important relationships to build upon. I showed up a lot, so it wasn't me flexing flexibility that I
Hmm.
had as an agency owner's direct family member, and not coming in at the right time, or not staying late, or not pulling my weight. So I just tried to be very self aware of that, and make sure that I was hammering out accords if it needed to be hammered out. If
Yeah,
Making sure that I was taking those crazy calls if they were coming in, helping them as much as I could, helping, when I say them, helping the staff, with a very difficult situation. Hey, let me take that from you. Let me see if
sure.
I can help you, or whatever. So very much collaborative in the way that I approach that sort of stuff, and just try to come alongside them as much as I could, each person individually. It was a
Yeah.
lot of work, that.
And I imagine the huge risk in perpetuation is, like you mentioned, the entitlement. It's the thought of like, this is a foregone conclusion. I can take this for granted. But it sounds like your approach and what you would advocate for people is like, don't take it for granted. Be there, be present, be involved, and earn it
Yeah,
in a sense.
you do. Yeah, you have to. And hey, yeah, people out there listening, this is a textbook answer, right? This isn't like, I mean, I'm really not trying to sugarcoat any of this. This is what I tried to do,
Yeah,
right? So I mean, it was an intentional thing. I want people to feel like I'm a resource to help come alongside them and whatnot. Did I have opinions about the way certain people did stuff? And yeah, but it wasn't my business to command that process just
mm,
at the time, right?
yeah,
So it was more just, what can I do to help? What can I do to fix this problem? Sort of like, if it's broken, send me, right? That was
sure.
sort of the attitude.
You've gone through this process. You were actively thinking about it for probably 6 plus years, and not to immediately say like, "Hey, you did it. You crossed the finish line. How are you planning the next race?" How have the lessons you learned through this process influenced your own perpetuation planning for your role and for the agency? Has that process started?
I do think that it's never too early to start a perpetuation process, and have a way to hand over the company in a way that makes sense for the employees and makes sense for your family. I have a loose perpetuation plan right now that's built into the one that we just finished.
Gotcha.
So there's a little bit of that in there, but very quickly there'll be a need to more formally have some things set up. My wife and I did, and I encourage anyone to do this, is to have an estate plan. I mean, we're not 40 yet. We're really close, but we're not 40 yet, and but we already have a full, trust and things built out. Stuff that's not terribly expensive, that's very helpful when it comes to these sort of things, because there's this security blanket that sits
Yeah.
there now, that even if I don't have the details really jotted out, there's a lot of generic details that really explain the wishes of us, and what we'd want to do. So vitally important, though, for the business to know, especially your carriers, your relationships, to know what happens if you're not there.
Hmm.
um, One of the things that I've started this year, very focused, intentional effort on developing leaders within the agency.
Mm.
We had this very flat organizational chart, and as I said in the beginning, when it's 1 and then 17, that's a very ineffective way for you to manage an organization. So I had to break that up a little bit. That was a little bit of a transition for the staff here, to realize that I'm elevating some people as leaders.
Mm.
Some people's direct reports are now not coming to me, who they've reported to me for the last 7 years in a director of sales and marketing role. Now they're reporting to someone different, but yet I'm still here, and it's
Hmm.
still a very much a direct connection. So perpetuation isn't just, again, things on the page. It's leadership, it's responsibility, it's the division of that responsibility within your agency, depending on your size, and figuring that stuff out internally. So that, I mean, if I wasn't here, if I had to go away for weeks at a time, I'm pretty sure that our agency is going to not miss a beat. And I think that's a cool place to be. Getting there has been difficult, but I think we're really close to that.
It's a form of like care
Yes.
to think these things through and not leave this up to someone that's going to be struggling with that absence to then have to figure this out for you.
Yes.
Um, it's really kind of like an act of love to like put it down on paper and
100%.
figure it
That's
out.
the word I had in my head, Kenny. It was the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, this is a gift that you can
Hmm.
give, and it doesn't cost you a whole lot. It just costs you some time, right?
Yeah.
But if you do it, you'll be better for it. Your family will be better for it. And if you have multiple heirs, they'll be much happier
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
have things figured out. Yeah.
Let us talk about pitfalls. What pitfalls should people look out for in perpetuation planning? What's gonna trip them up or drop them into a hole?
A pitfall to avoid is allowing, especially a perpetuation. It's not like you're in an acquisition or something where there's really one party that might take the lead
Mm,
in an acquisition. I think with a perpetuation, it needs to be a mutual plan that's put together more than one dictating to the other the terms from the outset. I think the more that you can do to lay the groundwork that you're going to work together, to use a fancy government term, in a bilateral meeting, right? You've got this thing figured out, right? Like, we're going to come together and we're going to work on what this looks like together, not just, hey, this is my wishes, accept it. Well, what about this, this, and this? Like, some of that, just that will start to raise the temperature
mhm.
of the deal potentially. So I think working together in a perpetuation is the thing to make sure you do. If it starts to be too separated, too siloed, um, that can be a pitfall, because you may have the same end goal in mind, but have different ways of getting there. I also think, again, some of the pitfalls too, some of the more specific pitfalls, is not involving your carriers in that conversation. You don't want to surprise, especially your biggest carriers, when it comes to perpetuating. Like, be able to show your strongest partners that you have a plan for success. Be able to show that you got a plan for your staff, and you've got all these things. That way, it just doesn't it's everybody's sort of aware, and then
Mhm.
it doesn't become this massive uh laborious thing when you actually do make the transition, where you have to go through and notify everybody and work with them on the new agency agreements and all that stuff, because it becomes a mountain of work if you have to redo a lot of that stuff without proper planning.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of stakeholders involved.
Carrie also preached talk to your carrier reps, make sure that they are informed. And it sounds like the something that would be meaningful as you go through perpetuation planning is just like sitting and thinking about just the day to day of the agency and being like, who's involved? Who am I working with? Who am I talking to? Is
Mhm.
there a referral source that's huge for us that is maybe, father in law's golf buddy?
To your point, those relationships are beyond just the carriers. It's who's your IT person? How's that working out? Who's doing your website? Who are you working with X, Y, and Z? Who's your banking relationship with? Who's your all these things that the current owner has had these established relationships forever. Well, they're of the same generation as the
Yeah.
person that's getting ready to leave, right? So you got to think through that. Like, are these people the right people to continue to support you moving forward? Or do you need to start having conversations with a new CPA or a new
Mm,
whatever? And of course, that can also, Kenny, put some strain on it too. If
yeah.
you're the CPA that's been working with us, for 20 years, all of a sudden they realize that come January 1, and this wasn't the case for us, but just as an example,
Sure.
come January 1, they no longer have the contract. Is that really going to make them warm fuzzy wanting to do the taxes that year? Well, probably
Mm,
not.
hmm.
So, you got to work through some of those, like, relational things too with your third parties. Communication, man, and you've probably preached it for the last 4 weeks. Communication's a big deal.
So communicating, I completely agree. I think it's one of the most natural things that people will do, talk to each other. It is also one of the most challenging things to be conscious about and um, be effective and be heard in a certain sense. So how do you have difficult conversations during that process? Were there any um I think you alluded to the fact that you maybe changed management systems, which I imagine was a conversation. So how do you recommend improving communication during the perpetuation process?
In a perpetuation, whoever's leaving took their risks and made a lot of their choices decade ago or more, right? You got to start a conversation with that. In my opinion, this is what my strategy was. Hey, Mark, um, just want to let you know, I know that, there was a lot of reasons that we chose X management system, and it's worked for us and our processes are okay. But there's this other management system over here that I think sets us up better for the future,
Mm,
where you and I both have the same end goal in mind. And that is, I mean, financial prosperity for our
mhm,
employees and for us and for the family and all that stuff. So I'm not suggesting this just because it's a cool new piece of technology. I really do believe that it's the next iteration of our agency.
Mm.
Do you feel like you can support that? So that would be a specific way I do that. Now,
Yeah.
is it going to be as, I mean, I'm may not be quite as eloquent as that, right? But it's going to be along those lines. Like I'm going to start with a compliment. I'm going to start with a genuine compliment because I do
Hmm.
believe that there was a right place and time for this. Um, and then I'm going to say, look towards the future. You would want the same result that I think this will bear out for us.
Mm.
And that's with technology. That's with hiring new people. That's with all the things, right? Backing your information up with data. It's okay for the business owner to have these. My gut says we should do this, but for the person suggesting it, that doesn't always work that well, right? You
Hmm.
got to have some data to back it up. So I think coming with solutions that that make sense and are backed up with numbers and all those things will help have some of those difficult conversations. The conversation is likely only difficult because you've built it up in your mind that it's going to be difficult. Um, a lot of times, it's not being afraid to just engage on it,
Yeah.
and say, and you may have to pre-plan it. It depends on who you're working with, right? If you're a family member that's in front of you, or whoever is your boss is in front of you, you're thinking they're more of a let me just drop in and talk to them sort of thing. Okay, that's fine. You may not want to drop in and tell them you want to spend X amount of hundred, dozens of dollars to change a management system. You may want to
Hmm.
schedule that. Like, hey, I'm thinking
Yeah.
about this. Do you have some time to work on it? You're probably building it up. One thing that my father-in-law always would say: it's never as bad as it seems, and it's never as good as it seems. That was just a mantra he had. And he does. He lives life that way, and I love that about him. Like it's just even keel. Like it's just
Yeah.
very smooth. And I think if you approach it that way, it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. It may not be as mountaintop experience as you think it is. Like if
Hmm.
you have this plan in your head, I think if you go into it thinking, hey, let's just talk real, it's going to improve that communication process.
I love that advice. And as someone who spends a lot of time building up the importance of certain conversations to the point where I get paralyzed from having them, I think that is wonderful advice to internalize. I will send you my can't land the joke if I can't remember what the term is. My copay. I'll send you my copay for the therapy session. Thank you.
Perfect. No problem.
Yeah.
No problem. I appreciate that.
Because I think that's fantastic advice, and I hope the audience internalizes it like I
Sure.
will. You've touched on this a little bit, and I think your process makes a lot of sense because you were hands-on. You made sure you were involved. You made yourself available to tackle difficult situations to help out the agency. But let's think about January when you became the CEO of the agency to now. How did the perpetuation process impact your relationship with the other team members in the agency? Is there anything that you would do differently looking back on the last this year or the last 6 years?
I don't know. I think probably I put a lot of pressure on myself, and that was probably something that I shouldn't have done so early. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's just me though. This is just a me thing, Kenny. So like,
Hmm.
I have these, um, these goals. I'm very sort of goal oriented, so I'm trying to get to certain places. And I think just if I would have taken a step back, maybe sat back a little bit in the chair and listened more and stuff like that, there could have been some smoother transition pieces. But I will say, by and large, the transition has been fairly smooth, smoother than I thought it would be.
Mm,
The first few months, if you would have asked me how's it going, you would have heard me say I'm exhausted,
sure.
um, because mentally there's just a lot of things you're thinking about. Like
Hmm.
you try to plan as most best you can, but then once the domino falls, and then you start doing things that you haven't done before, and you're talking to different people that you haven't talked to before. Again, a lot of those third party folks that you're talking about, it's just like, whew, and I got to lead the staff, and we got to try to sell some business, and there's just a lot more pressure, right? I don't know if there's something you can do differently there. I mean, you just prepare yourself the best you can and try to walk through it. You
Yeah.
also don't want to be, and this is one thing too I'm sometimes a little too peacemaker
Mm,
about me.
sure.
And I think, I don't want to, I really think about what decisions I'm making and how they impact someone's job and responsibility, and fearful of what that might do to them. And I think I probably was a little bit too overly
Mm,
conscious of that.
sure.
And rather than we need to make a decision here because it's important for the business. And we're just going to have to communicate that even better to the person that that's affecting.
I appreciate that honesty. I think I think this whole conversation has demonstrated that you spend a lot of time meaningfully thinking about the agency and the business and the people involved in it, which I think is key
Yeah.
to being successful in the insurance space, is like caring about people. How is the agency doing today? How has everything kind of developed over the last 8 months? How's the business doing? Growing? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
How's the team feeling?
Yeah. Team is feeling very good. We map out cultural effectiveness. It's sort of like a net promoter score that we
Mm,
use internally
hmm.
with my leaders, and so we map that out week to week. Really trying to keep track and pulse of how we're all feeling about the operation. We're seeing the numbers of the operation, trying to mesh together both the tangible and intangible metrics that you can think about and look at with your business. We've been on a growth trajectory. We're exceeding profitability numbers and goals for the year, which is fantastic. We're doing a lot with just updating things, just trying to give it a fresh look, a fresh face, not flipping it on its head, right? But just again, trying to just brush up some things, like let's change out that doormat that's really needs to be changed out, that sort of stuff. Just trying to just give it a little bit of freshness to it without trampling over what my father-in-law has set up, so it's doing very, very well. Very excited about what this team has in front of it. Very excited about our future as an agency. We are positioning ourselves to grow geographically within the state, either through helping people through a perpetuation or an acquisition process if they don't have an internal perpetuation, or planting a shingle somewhere. We've got a loose shingle planted in a different city in North Carolina right now, and I'm very excited about it. It's a relatively new development for us. Those are some of our goals, and we're moving forward on them.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah,
I think the audience is going to agree with me when I say that it feels like the agency is in good hands. Um,
thank you.
Landon, I really appreciate your time and perspective today. I think that this is such a great little bookend to our conversation about perpetuation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Anytime.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. For the best way to contact today's guest, click the episode description. We appreciate you listening and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives Podcast.